3:47 a.m., June 19, 1944, somewhere in the Philippine Sea. Seaman Second Class Roy Madden is lying in his rack, 5 decks below the flight deck of the USS Lexington when the ship's guns start firing. He does not know what is happening above him. The hatch is sealed shut, and he is locked inside a metal box with 180 other men, while somewhere above him, the sky is full of Japanese aircraft trying to kill everyone on board. This is the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the largest carrier battle in history, and right now, the only thing standing between Roy and the bottom of the ocean is the men on the guns he can hear but cannot see. What happens next will determine whether he ever sees land again. Roy Madden grew up in Terre Haute, Indiana, far from any ocean, in a town where the biggest body of water most people ever saw was the Wabash River. He was 5 feet 9 inches, lean, with the kind of hands that came from farm work, not from anything glamorous. He had enlisted at 18 because the Navy offered something the Army didn't: a trade. He trained as a damage control seaman, which meant his job when things went wrong on the ship was to run toward the fire. He had never been on a ship before boot camp. By the time he stepped onto the Lexington, he had seen exactly one ocean, and he had not liked it. But he was there. And by the summer of 1944, he had learned what living on a carrier actually meant, because nobody told you before you got on board. An Essex-class carrier was designed to hold a crew of about 2,600 men. That number covered the pilots, the sailors, the engineers, the cooks, the medics, literally everyone needed to operate the ship and its aircraft. Then, the war changed everything. After Pearl Harbor, after kamikazes started appearing in 1944, every carrier had to add hundreds of anti-aircraft guns, dozens of 40mm Bofors quad mounts, over 120 20mm Oerlikon cannons ringing the deck. Each gun needed a crew: gunners, loaders, ammunition handlers, fire control operators. By 1944, most Essex-class carriers were operating with 3,200 to 3,600 men. Some carried over 3,800. The guns were added. The ship was not made bigger. The sleeping spaces were not expanded, and Roy Madden knew something wasn't right the first night he tried to sleep. The berthing compartments were deep in the ship, 5 or 6 decks below the flight deck, as far from sunlight and fresh air as you could get while still technically being on a boat. They were large rooms packed with racks, which is the Navy word for bunk, 3 high, sometimes 4 high near the walls. You shared that room with 150 to 200 other men. There were no walls, no curtains, no dividers of any kind. When you changed clothes, 150 men could watch. When you wrote a letter home, the man next to you was reading over your shoulder. Below the flight deck, it was worse. The hull of the ship absorbed heat from the water and the air and conducted it through every wall, every floor, every ceiling. In the boiler rooms and engine rooms, temperatures regularly exceeded 130 degrees during normal operations and climbed higher when the ship was running at full speed during combat. The ventilation system pushed air through the ship, but in the tropics, the outside air was already 90 degrees with 80% humidity, so all the blowers really did was move hot, wet air from one place to another. The skin conditions like heat rash, jungle rot, fungal infections were so common that most men stopped mentioning them. Showers were 3 minutes, if you got one at all. Wet down, soap up, rinse off, and the water cut off automatically. Many men got 1 shower every 4 to 7 days. When the water pressure was low, which happened often, the shower was barely a trickle. When the evaporators had problems, which also happened, there were no showers at all. On other days, you washed yourself with a wet cloth. Sailors called it a whore's bath. After a week in tropical heat, wearing the same dungarees you had worn for the past 5 days, living in a room with 150 other men who were doing the same thing, the smell was something that stopped being something you noticed and became something you simply lived inside of. The first time Roy went topside after a week below decks, the fresh air hit him so hard it almost made him dizzy. Everything described so far was the normal part. The heat, the smell, the overcrowding. That was just daily life. Combat, on the other hand, was something else. When the general quarters alarm sounded, every watertight door on the ship slammed shut and locked. Every hatch was sealed. If you were in the berthing compartment when the alarm went off, you stayed in the berthing compartment until someone in authority decided the threat was over. Inside the ship, the sound of hundreds of anti-aircraft guns firing at the same time was not something that could be described as noise. The 5-inch guns shook the entire ship. The 40mm guns hammered continuously. The men below the decks could not see anything. They could only feel the ship shaking, hear the guns firing, and wait. Then came the impact. The USS Franklin was hit by 2 Japanese bombs on March 19, 1945. The bombs ignited aviation fuel and armed aircraft on the flight deck. Explosions ripped through the ship for hours. Ammunition cooked off continuously. 724 men died and over 1,200 were wounded. The USS Bunker Hill was struck by 2 kamikazes in May 1945. 393 men died, nearly 300 were wounded. The flight deck was consumed by fire. Men who had survived went back aboard and kept fighting the flames until the ship was saved. After an attack, if the ship survived, the routine resumed. Bodies were recovered and prepared for burial at sea, and blood was scrubbed from the decks. And then, everyone went back to their watches, their stations, their racks in the hot, stale compartments deep below the waterline, and waited for the next attack. 17 American carriers were sunk during World War II. Dozens more were damaged, some of them multiple times. The carrier was the most valuable target in any fleet. The Japanese knew it, and they attacked carriers relentlessly and deliberately. Every man on board understood that he was living on the thing the enemy wanted to destroy more than anything else in the ocean. Roy Madden survived the Battle of the Philippine Sea. He survived the rest of 1944. He was still aboard the Lexington when the war ended in August 1945. He went home to Indiana, got a job at a factory, and rarely talked about what he had seen. He died in 1987. His discharge papers are in a box in his daughter's attic in Indianapolis. He was one of the lucky ones.